So we have already discussed what happens if I have a neutral good on either the vertical axis or the horizontal axis. And I've defined that neutral good is a kind of good which doesn't necessarily add to my already existing satisfaction. So if I consume more of a neutral good, it doesn't necessarily increase my utility. And if I consume less of a neutral good, it doesn't necessarily decrease my utility. So right now we have goods which increase or decrease by utility based on the increase or decrease in the consumption, which are called normal goods for our current discussion. And we have neutral goods, which doesn't necessarily add or reduce our utility when we increase or decrease their consumption. So we have neutral goods and we have good commodities. Because why did I call it good commodities? Because we actually have something called a bad good as well. Bad good, yeah, sounds weird, I know, but they are called bad commodities. So bad commodities are essentially goods which if I increase their consumption, utility derived falls. So that's a very easy way of putting it. So if I increase the consumption of a bad commodity, my utility will fall. And if I decrease the consumption of a bad commodity, my utility will rise. So what is the most obvious bad good that you can think of? So let's say you have an economy, and we all know that an economy always strives to develop and to grow and to increase their national product and national income, and they want to increase their GNP, which is gross national product, or GDP, which is gross domestic product, and we know the basic stories of developmental economics. However, almost all economists agree that in order for a country or for a nation to grow, they will need certain technological boosts and technological advancements, which necessarily imply that if I increase the national income, which here I represent with NI, if I increase the national income of a country and if I grow and develop, the level of pollution, so I'll be very bad at writing them with my pencil, so I'll write it yeah. So if I increase the national income of a country, automatically I can very well say that the pollution will also increase. So let me just write that down first. So if I have increasing national income plotted on the vertical axis, then I can, and I want to plot pollution, which is here a bad good, naturally, because nobody wants pollution. It causes health defects, it causes a lot of chaos in the society. So nobody necessarily wants pollution. Now, how will the indifference curve look if I have a situation where I am plotting a normal good, which here is the national income of a country on the vertical axis, and a bad good or a bad commodity, which here I have taken as pollution on the horizontal axis. So let's say an economy is a very, let's say a basic primitive form of economy which has a 5 units of national income. Now this 5 units can be 5 crores, or it can be 500, or it can be 50. Let's say it's some 5 units of national income, and it has zero amount of pollution. So it's a very primitive form of economy, and it does not essentially have a lot of technological advancements or technological developments, but it follows barter system, and through the very primitive economic procedures, it has some amount of national income, 5 units of national income. So we have zero pollution and we have 5 national income. Now, through the process of development, the economy grew, it went through technological advancements, and it increased its national income to 11 units. So if this is 10, let's say somewhere around here is 11, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, so this is 11. But in the process of development, what the country did is it produced a lot of goods. Yes, it increased its production, but for that it needed to set up a lot of industries, it needed to set up a lot of factories, and what that did it increased essentially the pollution level of the country. So what happened is, from zero level of pollution, the country now faces 10 units of pollution. So right now, the country is at a point where it has 11 units of national income and 10 units of pollution. So from this point, the country has moved to this point. again, the country still wants to grow further. So what the country does is it still keeps on increasing the amount of national income that it can produce, and it moves further up and up, and what it does, it reaches an amount of 15 units of national income. But obviously, the amount of pollution also increases. So right now, the country has about 20 units of national income, but of course, the pollution level has also increased, and what it has is about, let's say, 15 units of pollution. So the country has 20 units of national income and about 15 units of pollution. So the country is kind of around in this situation. So it has again developed, but at the cost of the health of its inhabitants. So a country which has more amount of national income can compensate the increase in national income with an increase in pollution. Or let's put it in a better form, if a country has more units or more amount of pollution, the only way to compensate that increasing amount of pollution is by increasing the national income. If a country has more pollution and it does not essentially have a increasing amount of national income, it won't necessarily be happy, or it at least won't be as happy as it was before. But here, since the country has increase in national income as well as increase in pollution, the country say, well, when there's a voting, the leader of the country can say, yes, I did have an increase in the pollution level, but I did increase the national income of the country as well. And when I grew, I did increase the pollution level of the country, yes, but I increased the national income of the country as well again. So the country or the inhabitants of the country can be equally better off in all these three situations. So I can say that this curve that I have, which is not necessarily linear, why I'll tell you is, this can be called the indifference curve. So if a nation is in this situation with 0 units of pollution and 5 units of national income, and with 10 units of pollution and 11 units of national income, and 15 units of pollution and 20 units of national income, the nation can be indifferent between these 3 points. So this is the national income of the country. Now, although not to scale, if you put the points that I've put forward, so 0, 5, 10, 11, 15, 20, this point won't necessarily lie on the curve, but if you plot the equation x square plus y minus 20 whole square equals 15 square, I'll give it down in the description box below. You will see that these 3 points kind of lie in the same straight line. So this is essentially a part of a circle which has its center at 0, 20. So the center of the circle will essentially be here. That's the mathematical way of representing it, but that's not necessarily connected to the economics part of it. What happens is, this is not a linear curve. So when I discussed neutral goods, that was a linear indifference curve, but this is not a linear indifference curve. Why? Because the diminishing law of marginal utility that I discussed, in order to justify the convex shape of the indifference curve, to some extent still holds here. So what happens is, let's consider the mid, not necessarily mid, but kind of in the middle section, we have 10 units of pollution and 11 units of national income. Now, as I keep on increasing the amount of pollution, it's already a very high level of pollution. From 0 units, I have gone to a level of 10 units of pollution, and I'm still increasing the level of pollution. So the people will say, we don't need any more national income. Please stop with the level of pollution. We don't need to develop any more. So the people will be like, even if you increase 1 unit of pollution, in order to keep us in the same indifference curve, in order to give me the same amount of utility, I want you to give me a higher increase in national income. So if you increase the pollution by 1 level, you have to increase the national income by more than 1 level. It's already a high pollution level. I don't want you to increase the pollution level any further. So what happens is, it keeps on getting steeper and steeper. So as you increase the amount of pollution, you keep on, the substitution rate increases. So the substitution with which you substitute pollution with national income, it essentially keeps on changing, and we end up with an indifference curve which shapes like this. Moreover, we need to find out how the level of utility increases as we jump from one indifference curve to another. So let's say this is the growth trajectory or the growth path of one economy. We need to find another country which has people who have always who always have a higher amount of happiness. So that will essentially give me a higher utility. This utility is one particular amount of utility which is value, which is applicable for the inhabitants of a particular country. But let's say I have another country which has an indifference curve like this. So essentially what happens is the people are happier because they have 10 units of national income and 0 units of pollution. They have, I don't know, 20 units of pollution and 10 units of, 20 units of national income and 10 units of pollution, whereas the other country had 11 units of national income and 10. So this indifference curve will naturally be at a higher level of satisfaction or a higher level of utility. So I can say that this IC2, let's say, is at a higher level, or it denotes a higher level of satisfaction than IC1. So we can say that as we move in the northwest direction, the amount of utility derived from each, or the amount of utility denoted by each indifference curve, increases. So when we talked about neutral goods, when we had vertical indifference curves, the utility derived increased in this direction. Similarly, when we talked about downward sloping convex to the origin default set indifference curves, the utility denoted by each indifference curve increased in this direction. But in this case, we have the indifference curve's utility denotion increasing in this direction. So you can see the direction in which the utility denoted by each indifference curve can increase in any direction based on the good that you have. So let me just give you the labeling. NI here is a normal good. Why did I write it in caps? Yeah. So here, this is a normal good, and on the that's on the vertical axis, and on the horizontal axis, I have pollution, which here on the horizontal axis, I am taking it to be a bad commodity. So let's call it a bad commodity, because I don't like the word bad good. It sounds weird. So let's call it a bad commodity. So when we have bad commodities on one axis and a normal good on the other axis, you end up with indifference curves like this. We can also have bad commodities on the vertical axis and normal goods on the horizontal axis, which we'll be discussing in the next video.